Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're asking you to maybe rethink something fundamental, what it means to be human.
That connection, right, between what we call spirit, soul, and body.
Exactly. Because a lot of the common ideas, even the ones you hear in, religious settings, they might actually be quite different from the perspective we're exploring today.
It can create some real confusion, actually.
Totally. So our deep dive is grounded in this really fascinating theological text, the unified being, spirit, soul, and body. It offers a distinctively Christian take on human nature.
And it challenges quite a few long-held assumptions.
It really does. Our mission, then, is to unpack how this source redefines spirit, soul, and body.
Seeing humanity as this genuinely unified whole.
And we want to explore why this matters. I mean, it's not just abstract theology, is it?
Not at all. It's crucial for believers, but honestly, for anyone just curious about what we are.
Get ready for some surprises, maybe. It might shift how you see yourself. Okay, let's unpack this. So the first big idea, the spirit. Many of us, I think, feel like spirit is something we have, inside us.
Like a component part.
Yeah, exactly. But this source offers a really different take. It's saying the spirit isn't inherently part of us.
Right. It's presented not as something we possess, but as God's dynamic act, a transcendent act.
Transcendent meaning above and beyond us.
Precisely. Not an immanent divine spark within us, but God acting towards us. The source describes it as a continuous divine work, a gift. It's always free, always superior to humanity.
So to have spirit, then, it doesn't mean owning a bit of the divine.
No. It means God is actively present for us, providing the very possibility, the very freedom for us to live. The spirit is the principle and power of the whole person's life.
The may, I think the text says, the permission to be.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
It's the may from which the soul is awakened, and the body, the material body, becomes organic, becomes alive, and is sustained.
Wow, so life itself isn't just started, it's continually given.
Exactly. A constant, unmerited act of divine creation. New every morning, as you mentioned earlier. It's a gift, moment by moment.
Are there specific scriptures that back this up?
Oh, definitely. The source points to John 6.63. It is the spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The spirit gives life.
Okay.
Also Job 33.4. The Spirit of God hath made me, and the breath of the Almighty hath given me life. It emphasizes this ongoing divine action.
So, key takeaway for this part. Life is this constant dynamic gift from God, mediated by the Spirit, not something we just inherently possess on our own.
That's a great summary of it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We talk all the time about body and soul, often like they're, separate things.
Well, roommates, maybe.
Sure.
Or one driving the other.
Yeah, or even fundamentally different substances just sort of stuck together.
Yeah.
But this deep dive, it completely turns that on its head.
It does. It presents humanity as a unified, indivisible whole. The phrase used is soul of his body.
Soul of his body, not soul in his body.
Exactly. That distinction is critical. It's a direct challenge to those dualistic philosophies, soul and body, as totally separate realities.
Like the ghost in the machine idea.
Right. And it also pushes back against monistic views, the ones that say everything is just spirit or everything is just matter.
Yeah, okay, so how does this unified whole idea work then, if there's still talk of soul and body?
Well, the source acknowledges a kind of duality, yes, a soul and body, but it stresses this is a relative duality, internal to creation. Meaning it's not like the absolute difference between the creator and the creature. It's a distinction within the unified created being. We are creaturely life awakened by God's will, as we discussed with the spirit, and also creaturely being, a physical spatial form, a body.
A souled body.
A besouled body. And here's the crucial part. The soul isn't some independent thing living in the body. The soul is the life of the body.
So without the soul.
The body is just inert matter, just dust, as Genesis said.
And vice versa.
And conversely, the soul can awake and be only as soul of a body. They are intrinsically, fundamentally one reality in two aspects.
So this really takes aim at that classical Greek idea, doesn't it? The soul as this immortal thing just temporarily imprisoned in a body.
Absolutely. A view that, as the source notes, unfortunately seeped quite heavily into traditional Christian thinking over the centuries.
And caused problems.
Well, this perspective sees it as a grace and kindness of the Creator, that we don't have that kind of split, that we're spared the, quote, terrifying thought of having to bridge some infinite gap between soul and body.
Instead, it's a solid inner unity.
Yes, allowing us to be wholly and simultaneously both soul and body in peace. It's this unity that makes us a single, integrated self.
A self who can relate to God?
Exactly, a self-united being capable of interacting with God and the natural point of contact, the source says, for God's covenant of grace.
Is there scriptural backing for this unity too? You mentioned Genesis.
Yes, Genesis 2.7 is key. The Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul.
Became, not received.
Right. The forming of the body from dust and the breathing in of life happened together, resulting in one thing, a living soul, not a soul put into a pre-existing body.
And you know, it matches our experience, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, we just say, I think, or I feel hungry, or my foot hurts. We don't naturally think my soul is thinking via my brain, or my body is signaling hunger to my separate soul. We experience ourselves as one I.
That's a very good point. Our language and intuition reflect this unity. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, understanding this unity isn't just academic. It has huge implications for how we live and what we believe. It helps us avoid some pretty significant pitfalls.
Okay, like what are the dangers of not seeing ourselves this way?
Well, first, it counters what the source calls abstract dualism. That's the historical tendency, often influenced by those Greek ideas, to devalue the body, to see it as lesser, maybe even inherently bad, compared to the pure soul.
Right, the idea that the body is just a temporary vessel or even a prison.
Exactly. And this unified view corrects that. It also corrects the often unbiblical focus on the soul's inherent immortality, as if it just naturally lives forever on its own.
Instead of focusing on
the distinctively Christian hope of resurrection, the source is blunt. The idea of the soul as an imperishable, immortal spiritual substance, separate from a lower mortal body, is, quote, quite unbiblical.
And the practical consequences of that dualistic error.
Well, if you devalue the body in the physical world, it can lead to neglecting physical well-being, social justice, creation care, all the embodied aspects of living out one's faith.
Okay, so that's pitfall one. Devaluing the body. What else?
Second, it guards against the opposite error, materialistic monism. This is the view that says we are only physical beings, that consciousness, soul, spirit, it's all just brain chemistry, nothing more.
It's reducing everything to matter.
Right. Now, the unified view absolutely affirms our life is tied to our material body. But it insists we are also wholly his soul, which is the subject, the life of this body of his. It holds both aspects together. We are physical, yes, but also genuinely soulish, if you will.
So it affirms both the physical and the non-physical reality.
Precisely. And third, it also safeguards against spiritualistic monism.
Which is?
The flip side of materialism. This denies the reality or importance of the body altogether, focusing only on the spiritual, making humanity somehow objectless, purely spirit.
How does that distort things?
Well, it completely undermines the goodness of God's physical creation. And crucially, it makes things like the incarnation God becoming flesh, taking on a real human body, almost nonsensical.
And the resurrection too, I suppose.
Absolutely. If the body doesn't matter, why promise its resurrection? This unified view keeps all these essential pieces in place.
So what does this all mean? How does this unified view change the way we understand some of the biggest ideas in faith? You mentioned incarnation, resurrection.
It really anchors them. This understanding reveals a God who cares for the whole person. Not just a detached soul, but the entire unified being, physical, mental, spiritual, it's all integrated.
So God's care is holistic.
Deeply holistic. It makes sense of the incarnation. God didn't just pretend to be human. He became fully human, body and soul united.
And the atonement. Christ's death.
It means Christ's sacrifice wasn't just for souls, but for the redemption of the whole person, body included.
Which leads back to the resurrection.
Exactly.
Right.
The New Testament hope isn't just about souls floating off to heaven. It consistently points to the resurrection, the restoration of the whole person, the body included. Think of Romans 8:11. It says, "But if the spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his spirit that dwelleth in you."
Quicken your mortal bodies. It's explicit.
Very explicit. This promise of future bodily restoration and glorification makes perfect sense with a unified view, but it becomes, well, quite awkward if you have a purely dualistic perspective where the body's just discarded.
So this unified view really holds the whole Christian story together in a more coherent way.
I believe it does, yes.
Okay, so to wrap up, what we've really unpacked today, drawing from the unified being, is this powerful idea. Humanity isn't a collection of separate parts. but a unified whole soul of the body.
Activated and sustained by the dynamic act of God's Spirit.
Then understanding this isn't just, an interesting theological exercise.
No, it's fundamental. It shapes how we live authentically, how we engage with the world holistically,
And how we grasp the full scope of God's plan from creation right through to the promised restoration.
absolutely connects all the dots.
So here's something maybe to chew on after listening. If we really are these unified beings, holy soul and holy body, intrinsically connected, how might that change the way you approach your own well-being?
Thinking about the physical, the mental, the spiritual, not as separate compartments, but as deeply interconnected.
Exactly. And flowing from that, how might it shape the way you interact with the physical world and with other people, seeing them too as whole beings? Something to ponder.